The conflict in Northern Ireland is fundamentally about identity. It's about people, two sides of a community, or two communities wanting to identify themselves a particular way. And I think that what is happening at the minute is people are struggling to find a way of articulating in a new dispensation with all the new challenges we have what that identity should look like. So part of that is cultural, part of it is about how you describe yourself through where you come from, whatever, but part of it is also very private, it's internal, it's that kind of sense of personal confidence in who I am and where I belong and what I stand for. You have one side which would be talked about as the Protestant community, although it's got nothing to do with church, and that side would be talked about in terms of being unionist or loyalist. They want to remain part of the United Kingdom. The other side, which would historically been talked about as the Catholic side, although again it's not linked with religion, would be known as either Republicans or nationalists. And they, in terms of identity, want Northern Ireland to be returned to being part of the Republic of Ireland, the whole island of Ireland. That one of the things that we find it difficult to do in Northern Ireland is to understand really what the impact of violence here had on a population's mental health. So lots of individuals may suffer in silence. We have lots of communities where people have closed in on themselves, where there are serious mental health problems, but we haven't worked out, or we haven't found a way of understanding the relationship between that and living with violence as we did for so many years, particularly in those communities. And there's a correlation between the areas that were most profoundly affected by the Troubles, by violence, and now areas in which there's significant mental health problems, significant use of medication and self-medicating with alcohol and drugs. When I was growing up, it would be quite normal for my family had a bottle of Valium in the house. That would be quite normal. People, children even would be given a Valium before an exam or whatever. And I think that people now realise that that's not really normal. Suicide rate is up, which is a really sad indication that there's something deeper going on, and I think at least part of that is the existential crisis that people feel, not quite knowing who they are anymore, and Brexit coming down the tracks is a real threat to that as well. I think there's a paradox in that. So you could argue that what has happened in England has been the rise of English nationalism in a way that wasn't around 20 years ago. So the idea of a national identity and this kind of link between Northern Ireland unionism and what they saw as Britishness, which actually was more like Englishness at the time, that is breaking down because Englishness is becoming defined less in a way that is more and more difficult for Northern Irish people to relate to. So I think for Northern Ireland Unionists, that sense of connection with England, with the British Parliament, whatever, I don't think it's broken, but I think it feels different. And I think there are real challenges there around, if we're not that, then what are we? How do we talk about ourselves? What is the substance of our cultural identity? Because the substance now is going to be different to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. The situation in England has changed. The relationship was based on a assumed shared identity, shared cultural identity. I think culturally now, I don't think anybody here thinks that there's a huge cultural link between Northern Ireland unionism and Englishness. We may be all part of the union and be proud of or not of the unionist, of the union position. But in terms of cultural identification, I think it is a real struggle to think that there is a sense of cultural synergy between Northern Ireland unionism and London Englishness. Very different. Brexit is the product of an increase in kind of local nationalism, if you like. So English nationalism, as opposed to when I was growing up, this kind of very generic sense of Britishness. Right. But that nationalism, I mean, that's not unique to the UK. That's happening all over Europe.